The President, please be seated. The court is now in session. During this week, as scheduled for the hearings, the trial chamber is going to hear the testimonies of witness TCW 487. If the chamber is not possible to hear this witness, then we proceed to another witness, TCW 488 or TCW 321. Before we proceed, Greffier of the trial chamber is now invited to report on the attendance of the parties to the proceedings. Mr. President, Your Honors, all parties to the proceedings are present except Mr. Ieng Sari, who is present but is at his holding cell. Mr. Ieng Sari has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The witness, who is TCW 487, is present at the waiting room, awaiting call from the chamber. Thank you, Mr. President. The President, thank you. Today, as Mr. Ieng Sari has waived his rights to be present in person in the courtroom, and he has already produced the written waiver, he will be following the proceedings from his holding cell through a remote participation, the cell in which the AV equipments are connected, so that he can observe the proceedings. Before we summon the witness or call the witness in, we would like to make the decision concerning the President, the document D366/7.1.188. During the hearing on the 23rd of May 2012, the trial chamber sought clarifications from the co-prosecutors with regard to document D366/7.1.188 entitled Statute of CPK Youth League. The co-prosecutors intend to refer to this document during the testimony of witness TCW 487. From a preliminary review of the case file, it appeared that this document was not included in the co-prosecutors' initial lists of documents relevant to the trial filed in April 2011, document E9/31, and July 2011, document E109/4, respectively. Further to the clarification given by the co-prosecutors during the hearings on the 23rd of May 2012, the Chamber now confirms that this document was included in both the co-prosecutors' initial lists of documents, as it is included in Annex 2 of document E109/4. This document should also have been assessed by the Chamber in its decision E185 on the admissibility of documents proposed by the co-prosecutors as relevant to the trial. The Chamber has therefore reviewed document D366/7.1.188 in light of the principles enunciated in its decision 8185 and considers it to have been put before the Chamber. Accordingly, as soon as practicable, this document will be assigned an E3 reference number, and in the meantime, the document will continue to be referred to as the 366/7.1.188. The court officer is now instructed to bring the witness in. The President, good morning, Mr. Witness. Before we proceed to hear your testimonies, the Chamber would like to give you some instruction concerning the use of the microphone and how you respond to questions. You are advised to only respond to questions when your mic is activated, or wait until you see the red light on the mic before you proceed with your responses. Otherwise, your statement could never be rendered by the interpreters. If you pause a little bit, then you would notice the red light on the mic. Secondly, we would like to ask you a few questions concerning your background. What is your name? Response: Mr. President and Your Honors, my name is Ni Kon, alias Kon. The President: thank you. How old are you now? Response: I am 69 years old. The President: thank you. Where do you live? Response: I live in Sampaloon district. The President: thank you. What is your occupation? Response: I am an advisor to the Ministry of National Defense. Currently, I help the parties work in Sampoluna district. The President, thank you. What is your father's name? Response. He is Seung Nghi. He was deceased. Question. What is your mother's name? Response. She was Seung Suon. Question. What about your wife's name? Response. Lam Kum Sat. Question. How many children do you have? Response. 3 children. The President. Thank you, Mr. Nikon. According to report by the greffiers of the trial chamber, you have no relation with any party to the proceedings, including the civil parties and the 3 accused persons. Is that correct? Response. Yes, it is, Your Honors. Question. Before you came here, had you already taken an oath? Response. Mr. President and Your Honors, I have already taken an oath. I took it 4 days ago. The President, thank you. Mr. Nikon, as a witness before this chamber, you have the right not to respond to any questions or question that lead to self-incrimination. This means that if your statements are self-incriminated or the statement that may result in the prosecution against you, you can refrain to do so. You are here asked to respond to questions concerning your experience, what you witnessed, what you saw, and tell the court the truth. Indeed, you are allowed not to self-incriminate yourself. Do you understand this? Response. Mr. President, yes, I do. The President, the chamber has assigned a duty counsel to assist you during the course of your testimonies before this chamber. The duty counsel is here to help you when self-incriminating questions or responses are to be given. Then counsel will be ready to assist you, and you have the right to this counsel. Next, we would like to proceed to the prosecution to begin with the questions to this witness before other parties. You may proceed. Mr. Chandarareksamai. Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, and the witness. Good morning to everyone in this courtroom and also outside the courtroom. Good morning, Mr. Nikon. As the National Co-Prosecutor, I will be putting some questions to you concerning what you saw, what you heard during the regime of Democratic Cambodia. My first question is concerning your background of your family background. How many brothers and sisters have you got? Response. I have 2 brothers. Question. What are their names? Response. Number 1, Son Sơn. Sun Chum. Number 2. Question. Could you briefly tell the court the occupations or the roles of your 2 brothers during the movement of the Democratic Cambodia? Response. I am not sure I can share with you the roles of my first brother, Son Sen. I don't understand what he did clearly, but I'm sure concerning the roles of my second brother, who was the ambassador to the Korea for a short while. Question. Could you tell us from which year to which year did your brother work as the ambassador to the North Korea or to the Korean country? Remember, response, I don't remember that for sure. Question, you said that you don't remember the roles of Mr. Son Sen. Could you please could you describe a little bit his roles during the Democratic Cambodia, just briefly? Response, I can understand that he was leading the army back then. Question, leading the army, in which zone did he lead the army and in which year, please? Response, it was during the time when we attacked or we fight the American imperialists. Question, in which zone did he lead the troops to fight the Americans? Response, in general, he led the army in the area of Stung Trang and downstreams, and this mission ended in 1975. Question, do you remember the name of the division he was in charge of? Response, I don't remember. I cannot recollect. Response, question, during the Democratic Cambodia regime, do you remember what roles your 2 brothers would have played? Response, as indicated, I only know the general roles of them. I know that they were leading the army movement. That's all. Question, I would like to know about your educational background from 1975 or before that. Could you please tell us how far you went to school? Response, I finished junior high school in 1965. Question, in which school did you finish that education? Response, I studied at Sisawat Junior High School in Phnom Penh. Question, did you continue your education after that? Response, no, I didn't. I became a teacher after that. Question, in which school were you a teacher? Response. I worked as a teacher in Siem Reap province at a primary school. Question. From which years to which year were you the teacher? Response. I had been working as a teacher briefly because after the practicum session, it took me 1 year already, and then a few years after that I stopped teaching. Question. May I ask you about your brother's name, Son Sen? Did he encourage you to join the revolution movement after you finished your education at the junior high school? Response. Normally, as the elder brothers, if he felt something was good to advise us, then he would do so, and he did that in good faith. He advised me to do good things. Question. Did he advise or recommend you to join the revolution movement? Response. Back then, the movement was the common one all across the country. It's called the Common People Movement, to join the movement and go into the Maki forest. And we felt it was good to do that, so we joined them. Question. Did he tell you the reason behind asking you to join the Maki or to go to the Maki forest? Response. At that time, we were told that we went to the Maki to fight the enemy who invaded our countries and to protect the sovereign of our country and to promote the living condition of our people. Question. You said that you were told to fight the invaders and enemies. Who were they? Could you please be more precise on this? Response. They were the Americans and the Tribunal people. That's all. Question. Could you tell the court why Tribunal people and Americans were regarded as enemies, and did Son Sen ever talk about this? Response. My brother did never specify on this, but it was just a common situation all across the country. Every teacher I worked with shared the same sentiment. Question. Did you know Mr. Son Sen go to the Maki before you or after you? Response. I and my brothers were parted ways. I was in Siem Reap rural area when my brother was in Phnom Penh. I did not know when he went to the Maki because at that time the information was highly classified. I could never know this. Question. When in Phnom Penh, do you know where he worked at, in which office, for example?
I could only recall some of the information concerning that matter. I don't know what it is called now, but it was somewhere close to the Independent Monument. It may be a pedagogy training center or so. It is somewhere around that place. Question. When did you exactly join the revolution? Response. It was immediately after the coup d'etat in 1970. Question. Can you be precise? From which year to which year did you join the revolution? Response. I cannot recall it well, but it was sometime after 1970 coup d'etat, and then I remained in the revolution until the end of the war. Thank you. Question. After you joined the revolution, you were part of the front, is that correct? A response. Yes, that is correct. Because in my capacity as a teacher back then, the front needed forces in order to proselytize. They need people who are outspoken, people who can take notes of what was going on. So I was needed at that time. Questions. What was the substance of the propaganda at that time? Response. The essence of the propaganda back then was that we had to proselytize the people, the popular mass around where we were living, in order to ensure that they are self-reliant, because we were applying the so-called self-reliant, independent, and self-mastery. And in addition to that, we united in order to go to any battlefield. Question. Just now you said that you were part of the front. What do you mean by front? Response. I do not understand it, but my only understanding back then was that we united all across the country, both the senior officials down to the lower level had to unite in order to go to war. Question. Can you clarify the structure of the front? What was it like? Response. Your question is obviously beyond my knowledge. Thank you, says the prosecutor. I move on to the next question. Did you become a revolutionary youth of the Youth League? Response. No, at that time I became what was called the progressive mass, and we were in the propaganda teams. Questions. What do you mean by progressive mass? It means, as I described earlier, we had to be very active in proselytizing, and we did whatever we were given to do. Question. What was the difference between progressive mass and revolutionary youth? Progressive mass refer to the lower level masses. They they were little above ordinary citizen. Question, how about the Revolutionary Youth League? Response, to my understanding, league refers to an upper authority. They are well above the citizens. Question, the immediately above the people, or at what level were they? Was it? Response, I am not clear. Question, so you did not become a member of the Revolutionary Youth League, is that correct? No, I did not. Question, did you ever become a member of the Communist Party of Cambodia then? Response, to my recollection, I was declared a member of the Communist Party of Cambodia sometime in late 1974. I cannot recall the exact date. Question, why did you decide to become a member of the Communist Party of Cambodia? Response, no, I did not want to be a member, but it was not up to me. It was up to the Angka at that location. If they view that I had necessary qualification to be a member, then I would be included in the party. Question, what were the criteria to be member of the Communist Party of Cambodia in each locality? Response, frankly, I cannot recall it well, but one of the criteria is honesty and dedication to work, and good moral behavior as well. Question, you said that you did not join the party on voluntary basis, but instead the upper echelon or upper authority included you in the party. Can you recall the names of those up in the upper authority who introduced you to the party back then? Response, in each locality there was a party branch, and each branch was responsible for each locality, and they oversaw the party activities. But I did not know the composition of the branch, and I did not know how many members belong to that branch as well. But they discussed internally among themselves to judge on the qualification to be met by new members. Question, who actually included you in the party in the first place? And where is he now? Response, the person who first introduced me to the party was in the propaganda committee by the name of Sein. He is deceased. He was a teacher in Siem Reap province. Question, what was the name of that branch and where was it located? Response, Branch was attached to the district and the propaganda unit. In the general propaganda unit where I belong, I worked in Siem Reap, and then the branch was located somewhere close to that unit as well. But they were on mobile at that time. They were not fixed in one particular place. Question. Before they admitted you to the revolutionary movement, did you have to go through political trainings or political indoctrination? Response. Yes, I did receive political indoctrination and training. Question. What were the objectives of the political trainings or so-called indoctrination? Response. As I said earlier, it was impossible to introduce or to simply give the party members documents. They had to train it. And as I said, the main purpose was to educate people to be self-reliant, and they propagandized in order to proselytize people to join forces in order to go to war. And others are secondary objectives, but the main objective were the two I described earlier. Question. Where did the trainings take place? And how often were the training conducted? And who was in charge of conducting the trainings? Response. I did not remember how many trainings we had, but the trainer was saying, as I described earlier. Saying, who was the teacher. Where did the training take place? Response. In time of war, for your information, in times of war, everything was on mobile in order to ensure our security. Question. What was Saing's role in the revolutionary movement or in the Communist Party of Cambodia? I did not know exactly, but he was the chairman of the branch in that location. Questions. Did you know why Saing sent you to the political training? I did not understand it too well, but it could have been the appointment by the upper echelon, but I did not know at what level the authority came from. Question. How many trainees attended each training session? Response. At that time, the training was rather focused, and it was not an open training for fear of securities and others, and there were around 3 or 4 members in each training session, 4 or 5 members. Question. You said that it was a rather narrow training with 4 or 5 members for fear of security. What was the security like at that time? Securities in that context was that we were in war, there were air raids, and there were other issues as well. The issues were interrelated, and in addition, we did not know who was who exactly at that time, because it was a nationwide movement. Everyone had to be self-vigilant. Question: when you were attending the political training, did the trainer provide any documents or materials for the trainees, for example, the party documents or any other documents? Did you receive any materials or documents during the training sessions? Response: no. At that time, we did not receive any material, but we took notes, we jotted down, and there was no published materials. They talked, and then we had to jot down points that we found important. Question: have you ever heard of the revolutionary flag? Response: revolutionary flag was a later issue. It was sometime around the time when the Vietnamese troop entered, but back then there was no a revolutionary flag. Question: so you said that you learned about revolutionary flag sometime before the Vietnamese troops entered, but can you be more precise? Where did you hear it, and how did you hear about revolutionary flag? Response: those who conducted trainings or education sessions with us, they extracted portion of the revolutionary flags to introduce to us. They extracted parts of the documents in order to introduce to us, but they extracted portion that is compatible with our ability and roles. Question: you said that saying took parts of the lesson or materials from the revolutionary flag to introduce in the training session. Is that correct? No, actually, Sein did not introduce the revolutionary flag to us, but he took note some part of it and introduced to them. Did you take note? Question. Response: well, they told us to jot down important points, but as for the materials, hard copy materials, we did not receive. Question. After you joined the revolutionary movement, now from April the 17th, 1975, to a later date, what was your role exactly? Response: my basic function remains the same. I was in charge of propaganda, and that was based on the fact that I could read and write. And I maintained this role until 1975, and then Later on, I was transferred from the base to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They actually placed me in the protocol function, but I did not know the exact department of this role, and then I was in charge of accompanying visitors. I accompanied visitors from Phnom Penh to visit Siem Reap province. We visited certain places for a week or so, and it took rather long, 1 week or even longer, because at that time the road conditions were not good enough. Question. Why were you transferred from the base as a member of the propaganda committee to Ministry of Foreign Affairs? What was the motive of your transfer? Response. I think you got it wrong. It was Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It was not Ministry of National Defense. And to my understanding, I think it was because I could read and write, and I could do more things over there in Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I did not know the exact reason, because it was the decision of the upper authority. At that time, information was highly secretive. So it was the decision, whatever the upper authority decided, we did not dare go against them. Questions. Did you ever work in Siem Reap province? A response. Yes, there was an underground movement in Siem Reap. It was a secretive activities, but later on we proselytized with the masses. When you were in Siem Reap to proselytize the mass, how long did you work there? Mr. President, there is no French translation. The President, court officer, please check with the interpreting booth. The National Prosecutor, you may proceed now. Witness, can you please answer the question I asked earlier? You said you proselytized or propagandized with people in Siem Reap province. Which district did you propagandize, and how much time did you spend there? Mostly I did it in Chikrain district, in Kumpung Day commune. How much time did you spend there? I spent around a year doing that job. Question: why did you target this district, Chikrain district, to conduct propaganda?
សូមជម្រាបជូនថាខ្ញុំមិនមែនជាអ្នក
Response: it was not my decision. I was a teacher in that location. That's why I had to do this job there as well. The President: I would like to remind the prosecution that you should be more precise on the period in which the question is asked, because without the specification of the period in your questions, then the witness may not be answer the question correctly and appropriately. Prosecution: thank you, Mr. President. When you were working in the propaganda committee, who was your direct supervisor?
សូមជម្រាបជូនខ្ញុំឃោសនា
Response: Singh was the chairman of the propaganda committee, so he was my direct supervisor.
Question: who was the main leader in your zone? Response: I don't know. Question: when did the revolutionary movement liberate the urban areas surrounding Siem Reap province? Response: it was a long time ago. It was more than 30 years ago, and I was not in charge as the commander of the military. I don't remember this very well. I was just a person who did the propaganda things. Question: in your task in propagandizing, did you educate people to understand the work of the party, or did you tell people more than that? Or did you happen to convince people to join the revolution as well in your course of work? Response: they did not mention the party's name. They referred mainly to Angka. So the content of the sessions would be well connected to the name of Angka rather than the party's name. Angka means a lot like that. It may refer to the revolution. Question: did Angka promise anything? Did they promise to do something for the people if they join the revolution? Do you remember this? A response: I think your question is repetitive because I already responded once that the main essence of the propaganda session is to fight the American imperialists, to promote the living standard of the people, and to connect the people to the battlefronts. Question. Thank you. I would like to put question to you concerning Sector 15 and later on converted into Sector 32 in the West Zone. Could you tell us where were you transferred to after you were sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Response. After the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, no one transferred anyone elsewhere. It was time when everyone had to be on a run. Anyone who could flee then could do their best to escape as much as possible. We fled to the west direction, to the Thai border. Question. Could you please clarify for us concerning your tasks at Siem Reap? Where were you sent next after you worked at Siem Reap before you had been sent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs? Response. When I was removed from Siem Reap, I ended up working at Sector 15 as an educator, as a person who educates people using the same content of education it means to attack the American imperialists. Question. Can you tell us a little bit about Sector 15? What does it mean? Response. The number or the code name given to the sector was decided by Angkar, and it was 15. I don't understand whether this 15 stands for any other name. Question. Could you tell us about the activities you would do at Sector 15? Response. So far as I recollect, Sector 15 is the battlefield in the northwest of Phnom Penh near Udong location. Their activities were to fight in the battlefields, and I was one of the members engaged in propagandizing. Question. When did you arrive at the special zone? Response. I'm not sure, but it is perhaps by late 1974. Question. Where were you then? Response. I moved from one place to another, but it was somewhere near the vicinity of Udong area. Question. Why did you have to move places? Response. I think the reason behind this is, in short, because of the war. When people were evacuated, I had to be with them. As you know, people had to be moved time and again. Question. Did you ever have any time to be working close to any of the leaders of the Democratic Cambodia? Response. As indicated, the secrecy was too high, the discipline was too firm, and as I said, I had to be given the task from other people, and I had to render the orders, and I had no opportunity to be close to them. Question: how do you rank your position in the Democratic Cambodia, the position as opposed to the senior leaders of the Democratic Cambodia, from 1 to 10? Where could you be fit in? Response: I'm afraid I cannot do this because I belong to the front level, and the front here has a broad meaning. It is the common force. And I cannot rank my level whether it should be 1, 2, or 3 or else. Question: before Phnom Penh was liberated, there were some situations in some sectors. What was your observation concerning these situations in Sector 15 before it was converted to Sector 35? What was the people situation like? Response: my observation regarding this is that the people had suffered from the war. When the war was over, we were obliged to feed the evacuees, people who fled cities. This burden was well shared. We had to make sure that people had something to eat, and we were tasked with this. Question: I would like to put to you some more questions concerning Sector 15 in March 1974. You said you went there before March 1974. Can you tell the court when exactly Udong was liberated from the Lon Nols? Response: I don't remember this. Question: were you in the area when it was being liberated? Response: I moved from one place to another in that vicinity, in Udong and another district named Punyelu. Question: what did the Revolutionary Army do after the liberation of Udong, according to your best recollection? Response: I remember clearly that the army joined the people to do farming, digging canals and dams. Question: so who made the decision to put the army to help the people do farming and other tasks, civilian tasks? Response: no other people could have rendered such orders. Decision could have been made from the upper echelon. And the purpose of this was to ensure that the policy of self-mastery, self-reliance be well maintained. Question: were people in Udong ever evacuated? Response: no, they weren't. Question: I am asking to you again the same situation during 1974 or March 1974. If there were evacuations, where would the people be evacuated to? Response: my understanding, my memory, if it serves me well, people were evacuated to villages. And people could also make their own decision to go where they preferred, for example, to be reunited with their loved ones. Question: what would be the reason, convincing ground to tell to the people for such evacuations? Response: I don't think I understand this. It's beyond my understanding. But I know briefly that the people were evacuated for security reasons, because they were afraid that people would be bombarded by the aerial bombings. Question: what about food ration? Did people have enough to eat, or were they concerned about food shortages? Response: people were afraid regarding the food shortages. However, my observation is that food was shared among other people, though they could not have enough to feed the influx of evacuees. Question: was the food distribution done voluntarily or forcefully? Response: it is a normal norm that instruction must be made or rendered by Angkar to do so. Question: people were afraid of the American aerial bombardments. That's why people had to be evacuated from one place to another. So how had the fear been in place? Until when did this fear fade away? Response: the fear lasts only when the war was not over yet. When the war was over, there was no more fear, and people had dug some trenches to take shelter.